Two, one. Hey, everybody, welcome back to We're Not Dead Yet, episode number 12, and we're not dead yet. I'm your host, Curt Schilling, and he is co host Brian Youse. What's up, B?
How's it going?
Good, good. I'm
Once
fired up.
again, I don't know why we film these on Sunday. I get such a bad mood watching the Washington Commanders play. And then I have to do a podcast and sound upbeat and friendly.
Well, but yeah, but anybody that knows you knows there's no podcast capable of
It's
actually
just an
making that
act.
happen. Right.
Just an act.
But I'm fired up. We got a really good episode for you guys today. We got two guests. We're probably going to cut this into a couple parts because I don't want to constrain it to time limits beyond what our guests can bear. But we have our first person to appear will be the designer of what I think will be in the next one of the next couple Hasels we release, Kharkov in Flames. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because the gentleman that designed Hatton in Flames, Andy Rogers, also designed this one. Andy's going to join us. We're going to talk about everything from concept to design to playtesting. And then after Andy, we're going to have Guy Chaney, who I playtested with at Aslock, who's been playtesting, and Brian and I have been playtesting. We're going to talk about playing the game. But we're going to do a little cleanup first. We got last week's contest winner, Brian.
Last week's contest winner is another name I can't pronounce, Bob Pifo. Pifo?
Can't wait till
P-I-E-P-H-O.
somebody named John Smith wins the contest.
I'm begging for a John Smith to please enter. We only had 12 people enter this week. I don't know if our watchers are down or what. I thought I made that as easy as possible. Bob, go ahead and send me an email, or I'll try and reply to the email you sent me. We need your shipping address. We'll send you the prize. And this week, it seems like we want to get this out of the way quick. So we're going to go ahead and do the trivia question. And another gamers-related trivia question. They put out a game long before we purchased the gamers in, when the heck was that? I can't even remember. 2011? I don't remember. Nah, that's not right. I don't remember when we bought them. Wow, that was so that long ago. Anyways, the font on the box was very confusing to me, and when I read it, I forever thought the game was called Bloody Ho. What actually is the game, and what's it about? That's the trivia question. Gamer's Game, not Bloody Ho like I thought probably for a decade.
Bloody
Difficult
ho.
to read font. I had asked our special guest, Andy Rogers, to come up with a trivia question. He sent me a few. We'll use those in the future because this one just occurred to me. That's an easy question. Hopefully we get more than 12 submissions. If we don't, that's fine. If we only get one winning submission, then that person will win a prize. But Bob, I will be emailing you as soon as we're done filming this today, assuming I can get over yet another devastating Washington Commanders loss.
All right. Anything else?
Nothing off the top of my head. We're currently having a sale. This is going to be aired tomorrow. So the sale will still be running for 3 more days. Go to mmpgamers.com. The sale prices should all be on the front page, I think, if I remember correctly. There are some deep, deep cuts on this sale. We're looking to move some stuff out of our warehouse because, quite frankly, we're generating more stuff and we need space. So please take advantage of it. Make my kids have a good Christmas. My daughter's asking for all sorts of $90 an ounce perfume. Is that a lot? I don't know. It's not for Curt, but it is for me.
It's a lot for anybody.
$90 an ounce. It's like, what do they do? Is this stuff made out of gold or cat
It
urine?
is. Yep.
And I don't even know what it is.
Absolutely.
But there you go. Please take advantage of our sale. Please enter our trivia question, trivia contest. One more time. Bloody Ho, not the title. What is the actual title and what's it about? Go.
All right. So, you guys have heard us talk about it over the last couple episodes. The Battle for Kharkov. This is the third Battle for Kharkov, which is a design from Andy Rogers, who designed Hatton in Flames. Brian and I have been playtesting it. I've been playtesting it on and off for extended period of time. Andy, as is always the case, has been playtesting with his group quite a bit. And I thought it would be good, or we thought it would be a good idea to bring Andy on and get him to talk about everything from concept to design to playtest to where we are today. He is what did we decide? He's 13 hours ahead.
I don't know. It's like a week ago yesterday.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
generally it's 13 to 16 hours. So
right.
he
So it's
actually is
tomorrow.
taking time off work, I think, to do this podcast, which, thank you, Andy. We appreciate it. Trust me, if you get paid more than the minimum wage, you're losing money in this transaction.
And there he is. There is our friend Andy. Hey, Andy, how you doing, buddy?
Not a flagophile, isn't that New
No,
Zealand?
no, no, that's our stars and stripes. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Nice
welcome,
shirt, by
Andy.
the way.
Glad to
Great to
be
have
here.
you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you.
So, Andy, we've been talking about Kharkov in Flames, and we'll get into some in-depth conversation because, like most of your design, you're playtesting as much as we are, and it's started to see some end game development, which is really cool and exciting because we're having a blast playing it. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Hatton in Flames and how that came to be, and then how you decided on Kharkov as the next one.
Yeah, actually, it's a really rich history. So this dates back to 2013 when I actually did three submissions, of which Hatton was one and Kharkov was a second. And the third one you've seen is a Pacific Island battle over an airfield. I submitted them all at once in 2013.
Okay.
So it's actually interesting. So it goes back that far. And Chaz Argent, your colleague at MMP, for whatever reason, he kind of liked the Hatton concept, and he was interested in that battle. So that was the one that moved forward and was released in 2018. So they all had rather similar concepts, and that was the one we pushed forward from 2013 onwards to 2018. That was Hatton. And we didn't push forward with Kharkov. After that, we went back, as myself and my Australian colleagues went back into the Pacific Theatre, and we put together a journal of Australian content. And there was a mini hassle in that called Sparrow Force. So we focused on that. And when that got done and released, there was an action pack as well. We circled back to Kharkov. And that's when we sort of pushed it forward back to you guys yourselves and said, hey, we sharpened it up a little bit back from its 2013 concept. And we said, hey, are you interested in that? Noting that there was quite a bit of Russian stuff coming on with Mr. Schilling's epic stuff and other stuff coming out from Mr. Cirillo. So we focused on that, noting that it would be a while before it got released because there was that Russian stuff going on. So in short, it dates back to 2013. That's when it first was sort of released, and the map hasn't changed that much.
Well, I'm really sorry it took that long, first of all. So let
No,
me
it's
get
on
that out
us.
there.
It was on us. It was good. Happy with it.
I'm curious, you know, had I known that Sparrow Force was you guys and put all the pieces together, because sometimes all this production happens and I'm not paying attention all the time, we would have called it Sparrow Force in Flames. But what is the next in Flames that we can look for? I mean, would that be the airfield? And is there anything there to flame? Zeros in
Now, if
Flames?
I'm let me jump in. That's the pack that we've recently been going back and forth on with the multiple airfields combat all over a couple different theaters around but basically focused on airfield combat around the world. And that was I just remember getting that kind of organized and put together. It looks incredibly interesting and has a campaign game on the back end of it,
Yeah, it does. That's a
right?
Pacific Island one set in an island called Biak, which is near Papua New Guinea. I won't bore you with the geography, but there was a bit of a struggle over that. Was General MacArthur's forces trying to push off the Japanese, trying to claim an airfield from which he could launch his campaign into the Philippines and stuff like that. But Brian, to answer your question about what's the next in flame, airfield in flames doesn't quite resonate. So we're working on, well, mainly me at the moment, is a couple of battles in Tunisia and Tunisia Desert in Flames. I think that might work. And hopefully in a few months, might be able to send you guys over a draft map and we can go from there.
We're building a product that people are going to say, "Oh, it's in Flames." I know that's from Andy and his group, and I enjoy playing that.
Yeah. No,
Absolutely.
and that's we're saying it jokingly, but we mean it. I mean, Hatton was so well received because we all of I think except for Brian Martuzis, we're all the same type of ASL player. Our eyes are bigger than our stomachs in the sense that we always look at I'm going to set up the Manila campaign game and play it face to face. And, and then Hatton in Flames comes along and they're like, yeah, that's way more edible and doable.
Hang on one sec. That was a very random Brian Martuzis comment. Can you explain that real
Well,
quick?
anybody that knows Brian Martuzis knows that if he can set up a scenario or that has 20 squads and 5 tanks, or one that has 604 squads and 102 tanks, he's taking 600 squads every single time.
So
All right. Well, I didn't know that, Brian.
it's interesting you mentioned that. So Hatton and Kharkov and the airfields. I made it sort of my decision down under, an executive decision to scale it back. So if anyone knows a little bit about the Hatton battle, it was actually fought over 2 villages. So you could have made it the size of one of the Stalingrad. It could have been completely epic. But what I noticed in 2013, and my college, we've been playing squad leader, and everyone loves ASL for 30 years down under. And this was the sentiment across the globe. There are all these other good games coming out, and people could, also play online and video games and stuff like that. And I could see my colleagues playing less and less. So I made a deliberate just to scale it back. So it wasn't Hatton and the neighbouring town of British Soften make it a big epic, 100 squads and 50 teams. It was just scaled back, where you get that sort of the maps that we put out for Hatton and Kharkov and the one coming up. It's only the equivalent of 3 boards lined up, so it's not that big. So we wanted to scale it back so you could play it a lot quicker. You could do a lot more tourney style scenarios. We play a lot of tournaments in Australia. So because I reckon nowadays people have a little less time, and there's a lot of other good games out there.
Well, and let me just add to that too. One of the things that I've noticed, Andy, with especially in the researching Kharkov on my end, is, and with Hatton is the same way. There's an opportunity in the future to scale those up, to make another campaign game that literally add, like a la Red Barricades and Red Factories, adding a second map to Hatton that would seamlessly fit into a larger campaign game, with the same thing with Kharkov. And I think that's kind of exciting because, and I had asked you earlier, and I'm very curious as I've started to read. I'm kind of curious to know if the Losowo area was a scene of fighting in the first 2 battles of Kharkov, and if there's a chance to retrofit an earlier sort of combat in that area.
Yeah, if I was to extend it, it's probably not around that factory area. But so the interesting thing about that factory area is fought over twice, in February and then again in March. So we've already kind of covered that. But in a nearby area, there was a fascinating battle, which that's where the recon elements of the SS divisions poured ahead of the supporting elements and got caught up around some schoolyards and around a ridge and got surrounded by the Russians. I think it was I might get this commander wrong, Curt Mayer. Someone can correct it.
Meyer, yeah.
Meyer. I think it was either him or another famous SS commander, and he got ahead of everybody else who's a little bit aggressive. So there's an excellent, quite right, and it's just to the northwest of the factories, but you wouldn't join the maps up necessarily because they don't necessarily overlap. There, you're quite right. There's a really good ebb and flow battle in that area, and that's what I like. I like the ebb and flow. I'm not a little less interested if you set up as a defender and you play 7, 8, 9 campaign dates just sitting there. I kind of like that ebb and flow which Hatton has and Kharkov has. Both sides can attack.
Yeah, so for you guys, we'll just drop this real quick. It's 4 campaign game dates, and the Germans are attacking days 1 and 2. The Russians counterattack on day 3. The Germans attack on day 4. And it's eminently play 5.5 to 6 turns max for any of the days. Not extreme counter density by any stretch. And we're going to show you a picture of the map right here, which, Andy, we will put a picture of the map up. But we're going to show you guys a picture of this map. And Andy, as we look at it, one of the things that I found, and we're going to have Guy Cheney on a little bit later to talk about this, these are hard factories for the Germans to get a hold of. There's location victory points. Basically, all the big buildings are worth a certain amount of victory points. The attacker has to have so many at the end of a campaign day to win and all that. And by the end of the day, there's, I think, 64 on the map total. And the Germans have to have 45 of those 64. And if you're looking at the map, basically it means that the Russians need to defend the bottom 4 factories based on where the Germans come in. It'll come down to the back end of the map for the most part. Now, we're going to talk to Guy a little later, who has had some very different experiences with the Germans in defending as the Russians than Brian and I have had. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the G7 building, that was like a factory administration. That's an actual building. That's not a factory. And it's
Yeah,
also the
100%.
scene of the German bombardment early too.
It depends where you want to put the bombardment. So different players play it differently. But yeah, you can bombard that building. It's a second level building, and it's tough to get the Russians out of there. It's like an administration building as opposed to the factory. So yeah, the Russians can hide in there like little rats and into nooks and
Well,
crannies, and you got to
because
clear it out.
because of the setup, it's the one place the German will know guaranteed there's going to be Russian squads in there because the Russians have to set up a minimum of 4 squads in that building at setup. And so if you're going to do the bombardment, you do it prior to all setup, you get a pre-registered hex and all the things that go with that. I'm finding, and I firmly believe, Brian, we're on our third different first day playing. We've had a couple really interesting situations with the bombardment rubbling specific building hexes, completely changing the face of the map. And his OBA, I think it's imperative, and I'm anxious to hear what Guy has to say about this too. I think the Germans have to use every OBA module as smoke because I just think that there's too much open ground between the buildings, not large spaces of it, but if you look at the as in Mike M11 factory as it relates to the Loswell, the J13, the big one, you can kind of jump from one to the other, but there's open ground between almost every single factory and the next one. And the Russians are running 6.28s and 5.27s and a lot of light machine guns, quite a few mediums as well, and they have a ton of guns. And as you've been playing it and as you developed it, what are you seeing as potential? I would say we're at the last 25% of the playtest, Andy, in that area. What do you think are the final hurdles to overcome before you feel comfortable with this being published?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So the principles with, and it's similar with Hatton and Kharkov, and they're kind of difficult to play test and balance because it's kind of smaller, which means if you get it a little bit wrong, the attacker can roll up the defender really quickly. So you've got to really fine tune it. And the feedback from yourselves has been, and Guy and Gary and yourselves has been really excellent because you kind of get caught up into your own battle rhythm and you get a little distracted and you get a little bit biased. So it's been really good to have that outside influence. So if you get it wrong, these smaller ones, you can get it a whole lot wrong. So this has been absolutely critical. So the general principle we're trying to follow here is much like the overall Kharkov battle. It's the defenders are falling back like a rearguard action, and they'll counterattack selectively. And that was like the Kharkov battle. The Russians came in, and then mainstream Germans counterattacked back. So what I mean by that is you're not having a big frontline defense. You'll have some there, and you've got to fall back. And as you said, you've got to use that open ground. So you've got to really deter the Germans from being overly aggressive. But if you set up too fast front, right, there's a likelihood that the Germans, with all their firepower and armor, can eat you up really quickly, and the campaign game could be over in a day or so. So it's a fine balance between the two. As to your question about smoke versus using the artillery as HE, it's a 50-50 split down under in Australia. So what some players like to do is they like to use smoke selectively with all their AFVs that have a lot of smoke. So they will smoke up selective places. But it means they'll have some Germans attacking across the open ground because you don't have that big OBA thing. So some players prefer to do that and use the HE effects to suppress key locations. Because remember, when you're firing out of an OBA with HE, you still get that +1. And with the SS with 8 morale, so long as they're not getting -2s, a good FFE with HE is probably enough for deterrence. And if you lose a couple of squads, SS rally really quickly. But it is a 50-50 split about whether or not you use smoke. The reason why some players don't use smoke is this, is you don't want to get in a hand-to-hand battle, a close combat battle with the Russians, because morale's out the door. They have 628s and you've got 548s and 468s. You do not have 658s in this. So you got to be careful about the SS getting into close combat. So if you smoke it up, a location you want to take, you can't shoot it up, and you got to get into close combat. So you will lose some Germans that way. So it's a tough balance.
If you're playing me, you want to force the close combat because I would lose. Doesn't matter if I ambush you or not, I would lose.
Well, and truth be
If it's
told,
3 to 1, I will. And
Brian is an exceptional player, and one of the things we've been playtesting, gosh, multiple times a week for a couple years now, and he's always hesitant, reluctant. I don't care who he's playing to go into close combat because a lot of things you can rely on go out the window. Close combat, the chancy issues of close combat, where Snake Eyes can completely destroy a game. And as the Russians, I love it because hey, it's another chance to create a leader, which they never have enough of. And I always feel like for the most part because there aren't conscripts in this game to start with. So I'm not worried about the lax stuff and all the other stuff that goes with that. And like you said, 5.27s and 6.28s, they make up for the lack of, the range by inviting you in. And it's an interesting debate, like you said, and I think it's one that Brian has had to weigh in all of our play tests. It is, do I smoke or do I shoot? And because you have the SS with the one higher depletion numbers, so they have the half tracks and the tanks are off the charts from a smoke perspective. You actually missed a couple from last. They rolled an 11 or something stupid, but it's almost virtually guaranteed, which to me screams to how important this German setup is. And I mean, you're talking about a campaign game, you got 4-day, whatever, but those initial first turn shots of laying smoke, whether it be an OBA mission or the tanks, kind of dictates how far you can move in that first turn, which is kind of where the momentum is start and stopped. Now, we played it wrong, which we just found out. All the Russians have to be in building. So my assumption is that means building/rubble, since rubble counts the same as building. But there's setup
hang on a sec.
restriction.
Good
Go ahead.
question. Andy, does that mean building/rubble, or do you want them only setting up in buildings?
Yeah, no, they're set up in buildings, but the thing about the rubble is the way the rubble rule is written as an SSR, and that's kind of a standard, it's counted as buildings.
Yep.
So
Right,
I mean,
that's why it is. Okay.
but that's one when you get down to your final editing and people like Klaus, Maelstrom come and pull you up on, is this what you mean? Is this what you mean? Do we need to tweak the
Right.
rules? And you go, okay, yeah, that's and there's arguments about designer intent. Designer intent is if there's rubble on the board, you can put your boys in rubble. If the rules that need to be tweaked to reflect that, you kind of do that. So yeah, so I mean,
But
it's
in this
interesting.
game,
So you go.
actually,
Well,
in this game, there
there's
can't be
6 rubble
rubble.
hexes on the map, right? There's 6 rubble hexes, 3 stone, 3 wood.
There,
And they're generally the wooden ones to me kind of come into play a little bit for the German that tries to do the end around on the western flank. And then but we've actually, and I said this earlier, Andy, I have been putting a unit in F Foxtrot 5 every time hip with wall advantage, and clearly that's not legal, which that completely changes. And Guy had mentioned earlier, and we'll talk to him in a little bit about that, but Guy had mentioned earlier almost allowing the Russians to put a unit or a gun in Delta 4 would be another way to kind of slow the Germans down a little bit, because those 5s with 3 rate of fire, and they can take care of the half track.
I wanna go back real quick to something Curt spoke on early. Clearly enjoying talking about this. I'm a little concerned that people are falling back out of that big building, the administrative building. What is it, H7? Too soon. I mean, I know they don't have a ton of troops in the first turn, but that building is +3 terrain in every single hex. The Germans only have 1 -2 leader on campaign game 1. You can't buy the second one until CG2, I think it is. And then the third in CG4. And if you happen to battle harden a few, you're going to have 9-2s running all over the place. Unless they die to snipers, but that's a different story. I wish people would sit more longer in that building.
Well,
I
gotta
haven't
tell
really had
you,
a chance to attend.
I got to tell you too, Brian. I played that building. I played it horizontally. I haven't been playing it vertically. Right?
You have
I've been
not.
playing no, and if there's 3, 6, 9, 10 locations. So I've been playing it as a 10 hex building. It's actually a 30 hex building.
Yep. And
And
guys there can cut route paths. to finish my thought, if you look at the map, maybe Garrett can throw it back up there. Maybe it'll still be there. I'm not sure. When you're taking these factories, you can't penetrate and move to the next factory until all the Russians behind you are gone, or else you're going to have route problems. I tend to attack from the upper corner, hex A0, A1, and down diagonally. I'm almost thinking you've got to attack just across the A's, sideways sweeping across the map so that there's no Russians behind you. But if you go from the top, especially I think it's the Q12 building, you get too far down that factory and the guys in the M12 building or the U12 building are going to make it so you can't route back and you're going to lose troops that way. I find it really difficult to take these factories just from that perspective that, one Russian with a little bit of a lucky line of sight is really going to hose up route paths.
And I agree with you. The worst way to lose a 548 SS and some leaders is through failure to route. So you've actually got to really make sure that your flanks are secure. So what I would argue in support of what you're saying is that big administration building, you must clear it out. But this is how the Germans operate in Kharkov. They were very aggressive and they took a lot of casualties. So the Dutch Reich division in Kharkov started with about 15,000 men, and over 5,000 of them were casualties. They were very aggressive. So what I would argue as a German player and as a Russian defender is you need to commit and be prepared to take the odd -2 shot to really force the issue and clear the Russians out of that administration building in H10 and H9. But equally, the Russians should be prepared to give up 3 or 4 squads to defend it to the death, because the moment the Germans take that, they can then start to pour a lot of fire onto the factory locations for the next phase of day one of the campaign group.
Right.
You got to, it's a kind of historical grim Russian defense and a very aggressive German, which is kind of the flavor you get in Hatton and Kharkov as well.
I'm gonna be very anxious to hear what Guy has to say, but I think that's the day one point break. I think the Germans have to have that factory administration building at the end of day one, because I think that's the jumping off point for everything they do after that. But in playing Guy thought, and again, we'll ask him. He thought that the Germans should be much more left to right as opposed to top to bottom. He thought that from A to N, Nancy, which is where the Germans can set up and come on that first day, he didn't get aggressive enough heading. So if you're looking at the map, the right of the map is the north edge. His second day, he went straight north and then headed east and brought down that right flank where that wall is, which I noticed, and Brian, we both noticed, and again, asking Guy, that Gary ran his half tracks behind that wall, and but they didn't play it right. Gary wasn't playing it right in the sense that there's no strategic locations to anchor your perimeter at back there. And he's grabbing board edge hexes when they mean nothing to the German, but there's so much strategy, which I love. And like I said, I ended up playing Guy for the week of Aslok playtesting. And one of the things he rectified, if you look at the R18, that 4 hex walled in area, and the V19, which both will be fixed on the final map because they have to have entryways into them. That was where he kind of made a stand, and he ran his vehicles down there, and Guy is as good as anybody with armor, and just basically killed a stack for failure to route. But his impression was that you need to, as the Germans attack, A to X, A to Z, A to double D, as opposed to down the A hex row, south to north. But I think they're both potentially viable. Now, we've limited the entry area, right? Day one, you can come in, turn 1, A9, turn 2,
He means CG1
and then
and
turn
CG2.
3, A.
Yeah, that's right. So in terms of, just to sum up the summary, in terms of the administration building up the top, when we're looking at the vassal map, H10, H9, yeah, Russians firmly hold that. But when I saw the playtest between Guy and Gary, the building the Russians must hold on to and stop any sort of German rush is that second level building, which is the other key administrative building down in G G23 and G22. And when we've been playtesting, it's never been taken when the Australians have been playtested, but Gary made a good run at it, Gary Fortenberry. So, and that led to some adjustments with the entry area. So that if the Germans get in there in the first dates, you talk about strategy, Kurt, that's a real game changer for the Russians. What does that mean from a strategy perspective now that we're on the topic? It means the Russians have to kind of defend multiple places on the board because the Germans, with their mobility, it is a panzer unit. They have a lot of mobility and good morale guys. They can come in multiple locations. And that actually reflects what happened historically. So as the Russians, you kind of need some guys protecting that second level building and the one above it in G18, which is a first level building, so that you've got your flanks protected.
Hey, we're gonna bring Guy Chaney in here to get a 4-person conversation going. Guy, welcome. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here. And
Yep. Thanks for
yeah,
coming, dude.
I'm interested to hear Andy describe what happened historically as well.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, Brian earlier brought up a really good question about strategy, about the Germans pushing forward without their flanks being turned. And that leads to failure to rout issues. The similar thing happened with the Russians, and a couple of buildings that you might not think play out in the first campaign date are actually really crucial on the first campaign date. That's the second level building in G23 and G20. So the Russians need to defend that, and that means their defense is going to be a bit stretched, because if the Germans get in there in the first date, it's really problematic for the Russians. This is what happened historically. So the historical play was the Germans deceived the Russians, and if you look at the top of the board, which is the western edge of the map, I think the military term is they demonstrated their forces up there. But that was all a mirage. When the attack went in, it actually went in on the southern flank along Hex Row A. And that's where the main attack came in. And there's a scenario in the pack that kind of reflects that. So what we tried to do historically to reflect that is we said, well, the Russians were a little bit confused as to where the attack was going in. And we made that rule, which we might end up getting rid of in the final version, where the Russians have to set up in buildings. So that gives them a little less flexibility. And that was a reflection of what happened historically, where they didn't quite know the Germans going to attack from the right edge, the left edge of the board, which is Hex Row A, or are they going to come from the top of the board, which is from the western edge? And that was part of the reflection of that, which might play out. But either way, I think the Russians have a big area to initially defend.
I just wanted to mention too, and something that I've noticed is the Russians. One of my strategies as the Russians has been, for those of you who don't know, the defender, as the Russians, I get 24 concealment counters in addition to all the concealment I get from my at-start forces. I've used those concealment counters for the most part to bluff a thick defense. And for the most part, what I've done is I've come, and the bottom edge of the map is east, is I've used those turn 3 reinforcements as my lockdown, that G23 complex, those 2 big 4 square buildings. And to be clear, guys, the F21, G22, and F20 G23 buildings, you have to control all 4 of those building hexes and locations to get the VP for those 2 buildings. It's a combined set of victory points. But you're right, Andy, if the Germans land there and somehow take those on day one, that's a nightmare for the Russians, because then I do have to spread my defense out for the rest of the campaign game.
Yeah, and hey, Curt, when people watch this, are they going to be able to see them out?
Yeah, we can. Anytime you want to mention hexes on the map, mention them, and Garrick will put the image of the hexes up.
Okay, yeah. So I'll jump in here a little bit. So right now, honestly, I think this is, despite some of the changes we've made, I think the Germans are basically an unstoppable mob. And the limiting this, and I'm assuming you're going to limit the setup to 9 and less as well as the entry area, right? They won't be able to set up down to 15. Right. So that's going to help quite a bit, because like talking about, and I agree with you, that F21, 22 building is very important, but it's impossible to hold it. Especially if they start in the 15 row. Like Gary, I've played this 3 times, so I'm by no means an expert. I've only played 3 times, but I had, my 2 HIP medium machine guns. I had the heavy machine gun when you could still get one, and a couple more squads in there. And he bombarded it. He put his bombardment hex in F-22 along with his artillery prereg. So the bombardment revealed me, and then I got unlucky. Nobody died from the building rubbling, but I did have 1 or 2 guys break. And then he called smoke in on the whole thing. And the Germans just ran at me. I had 2 guns on the road, on the E road, but the Germans set up down around E2, E3. So since I'm not in concealment terrain, I got to put myself on the board, and then they just smoke. They just smoke in front of you, and you can't see it. So yeah, I don't now. I'll have to reassess it with them having to set up all the way back in A9 because that's
Let
6
me,
hexes.
hey, let me interject and ask you a question then, guy. He clearly, for him to overrun those buildings, he bombards it and then he drops smoke, but he had to put a significant amount of his at start force down there to make that happen, right?
Well, you do, but I mean the Germans. So I'm looking at it right now. You got 35 SS squads, all 8 morale, 9 broken on the back, and 12 vehicles. That's what we've been purchasing. Basically, I'll read it out. It's the Germans on day 1 by I1, I2, I3. That's all 2 infantry companies in a platoon. Heavy weapon 5A and 5B. That's a heavy machine gun, a 259, and the mortar carrier. A3 and A5, which is 2 more Stugs, the Martyr, and another 251-9, and then a bombardment and the 80 millimeter artillery. And that leaves you with 1 point left. So you've got 4 vehicles with S10, 5 vehicles with S9, and 1 with S8, plus 2 unarmored half tracks that can like shoot anybody that's dumb enough to step up on the roof. Like, and the other thing to remember is that you can pull up behind the wall with those German vehicles, and you don't have to see the Russians. You just fire smoke up at the roof, and the smoke lands on the roof, drops down to the ground floor, and presto, they can't get out of there anymore. So they have so much smoke that unless you get incredibly unlucky, and it's almost statistically impossible with all those high S numbers, that you just get the smoke where you need it. So, and Brian, I just got to disagree with you. I think anybody that sets up in that 8-7 building is dead by like turn 4. You're just not going to be able to stop them. Like if you're on the ground floor, the Germans get to come up behind a wall with orchards everywhere, and we just usually just armored assault right up next to the Russians, and they get an 8 flat at you. And if they don't get you, you're just going to obliterate them in advancing fire. There's so much firepower there. Then some guy comes going to run up and put a demo charge on you. And if you set up upstairs, then, there's so many Germans around, they're just going to prep or opportunity fire their 9.2 with the heavy medium machine guns. And you're going to have to shoot the guys that are running at you. And then those guys are just going to clean you up during an advancing fire phase. So like, again, the last time I played the Russians the last time, and I just bailed out of there. I set everybody up in H10, H11, and G11 and just ran for the factory. Because there's just so many Germans coming. They get those 3 assault engineers. They come up, they throw smoke on your hex, and then once they get in the building and get the toehold, then you just can't hold it. There's so many 8 morale guys. Now the other thing is that the first time we played, we let the Russian reinforcements come in on the first turn, which is a huge bonus because you have to hold that huge J13 factory. And if you got the reinforcements coming in on turn 1, they can easily get in there right away. And so you use those guys to hold that factory. That allows you to take all the Russians that you would have had to set up in there and set up
Right.
out to cover
Right.
some of the stuff in the north. Now,
Right.
you guys were talking about when me and Gary played, and we both, and Curt, I told you up at Aslak, I wish that on day one, I would have done the same thing. The Germans just want to run north and get up behind that wall. And unless I'm wrong, you guys read the perimeter determination rules again. You can trace perimeter hexes to your half squads. So
No.
if your half squads are
No.
sitting out there,
No, you can't.
I'm pretty sure you can.
multi-man counters are not strategic locations.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at that again. That's
No,
the impression that we were
Well,
playing
Gary
under.
was wrong. Gary said that, and we showed him that was wrong because he had guys in GG1, and he was running along the map edge to try and expand a perimeter. And the only
Exactly.
perimeter drawing, the only strategic locations are rubble, debris, buildings,
Shell hole.
Yeah, there's no MMCs aren't. So
And
yeah, the
at
other
start map.
the at start map edge hexes. So you don't have this scenario where you have half squads running along edges or just trying to grab. I've seen that play out. It happened in
that was
Hatton.
for cheating on you.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
just silly.
Well, they definitely are going to want to try and grab that DD4 building if they can.
Yeah.
Let them have it.
Because that would be a nice place to build your perimeter off of.
Well,
Yeah, agreed.
Andy, in thinking about guys' perspective as the Germans being overwhelming favorites, I'm not so sure. I think if I could put a 45 in the DD4 building as the Russians, then at least I've got a chance to kind of slow down that half track end around.
Yeah,
Not by much, but
I mean, 145L with 3 rate of fire versus half a dozen half tracks, you win that fight every day.
Well, you're gonna have a smoke round probably. If the Russians can set up in that building, before I would drive anything that way, I'm just gonna smoke that building, and then you're not gonna hit anything.
As the Russians, that's okay, right? Because the Russians, I would argue, if this is a journal article and you're listing advantages, disadvantages, the disadvantage is time. There's not a lot of turns in the scenario except day one. If they're all what, 5, 2, 3, and
It's
4, or
6,
5 trees.
No, it's a good point. You got 21 movement phases as the Germans to basically
So
take the whole.
And if you look at the German setup, there's nowhere the German can set up to smoke DD4 until after their first movement phase.
And a real easy fix is to hit the gun in EE8. That's if we're talking about getting rid of the building restriction. Sorry.
Well, right. No, he said the guns aren't tied to the buildings,
The
right?
guns aren't restricted. That's right. Put that gun in EE8. You shoot smoke at DD8 and charge it. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's just right now you have to set up 5 and south, right? I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea to let the Russians set up in row C. Row C is the. Am I right about that, Andy?
It's row D that they can set up, and the Germans set up in that's only with guns because you got that building restriction. So
right. D5
set up on or north of D, right?
Right.
So yeah, maybe make it on or north of E.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. Absolutely. So
I don't know. It's
just a couple of things.
Just that.
So the guy and your playtestings over in the States have been absolutely excellent. So generally speaking, like with the Hatton design and the Kharkov design, you try to. So the Germans were always quite strong, and we're trying to scale back the Germans and boost up the Russians through a variety technique to get that right point where the Germans do not overwhelm the Russians. They can fall back, they bend, but don't break. That's the defending principle, and we're trying to do that. So the two changes I like that have come in, that originally the German initial setup area was on the left edge of the map, was around 9, and then after some play testing and the Germans, it didn't go so well for the Germans, we extended it all the way down to 15. But I like the idea, having seen the way Guy and Gary's play test has gone, is to move the German setup back from hex row 15 back to 9.
15 to 9.
That's really good. And the other change I like is the Russians get the T-34s automatically. I think that acts as a little bit of a deterrence for over-aggressive storms and stuff going all the way down to the bottom edge of the vassal map and proving problematic there. So I think those changes will help with that. So I kind of like defending the administrative building because I like the trade-off of 4 squads, and then the Germans can't get in there on T2 and then start getting up on second level and start hosing with batteries with their overwhelming firepower. So on balance, I don't mind that trade-off. It's just to slow them down. So you will sacrifice some boys. But the key thing is what Guy and Gary's playtesting found out is if the campaign gate, and I think we can make these adjustments in that last 25% of playtesting, needs to ensure the Russians have a viable defense at the start of campaign game 2. So I'm open to suggestions to do all that.
Yeah, like I said, I think that limiting the amount that they can be to the north and the east to the 9 row and
Say that
whatever.
again, Guy. Limiting who?
The
Limiting
German
the
setup,
Germans, instead of being in 15, they'll be in 9.
Right.
difference.
And on upper side, on the top of the board, I think it was row N before, and it's what's that shifted to, if anything?
It's A to N, 2 or less.
They're still allowed to go out to N? Okay.
Little food for thought. You throw a couple of dudes in the second level of the administrative building, they can hit A4 through A8, and they're in open ground.
They can, but probably you're going to get smoked. I mean, if you want to get them smoked, they're going to be smoked. You have too many tubes to shoot at them. Or you might just prep at them with like a 12-up-1 with the 9-2. So I don't know. We'll have to maybe play sometime. The Germans want that H7 building. They're going to take it. It's just they got all those vehicles with
Right.
with
But
not just the smoke, but the armored assault just right up next to you, and you
but
can't
let me
do
throw
anything.
this at you, Guy. I think that if the Germans want it, they're going to take it, which I totally agree with. However, I think if they want it and they're going to take it no matter what, the amount of forces they have to commit allows the Russians to not have to be as concerned about losing the F-21 building and that conflict.
Yeah, I don't know, Curt. They have 35
no.
SF squads.
Right. No, you're right. No, if that's right, but and I was saying that because a lot of it has to do with the German purchases. If the Germans go infantry heavy, which I agree, they absolutely should, no
Well,
Well,
doubt.
the thing is
There's a rule. Don't forget, there's a rule that if they buy 2 companies of infantry and the other stuff you talked about purchasing, I think it's too much, and the second company can't come on until turn 2.
Yeah, you're right about that. The second company is going to come on turn 2, but
Okay.
all that other stuff is going to. They can have 17 points on the board, I think. Which
Yeah, I think it's
Right.
17 right now.
2/3.
17 or less.
2/3.
that's
Yeah.
the first infantry company is 8. The platoon is 3. That's 11, and then all the vehicles basically they can all set up on the board.
No, you're right.
And
You're right. And it has to be that way, in my opinion. The Germans have to be able to get a toehold on day one. I think it's very hard for the Germans to win day one, or it should
I
be.
don't. I think
Right,
it's
no.
a foregone
Right.
conclusion that they're going to
Right.
win the first day. It's
It's in Australia. Sorry, Guy, just on that. In Australia, it's kind of 50-50. No, they're leaning it's probably a little pro-German. Sorry, no, let me go back, Guy. It's probably leans into the Germans in terms of the wins. But even if, quote, the German wins, it doesn't mean the campaign's over. It's how much they win.
No, I agree with you there.
So when we design, you're designing, okay, there's a chance for both sides to win. Yeah, it's a little bit pro-German, but the question is, do the Germans break the Russians? Like, what I mean by break, it means you kind of play the first 8 and you go, oh, now we're in a whole world of hurt. They're in all the wrong places.
Yeah, and generally, and this comes from playing so many campaign games with McGrath. It's like your number one priority in one of these campaign games is force preservation. You don't want to lose anything unnecessarily. Like, you guys had really good points about the Germans not wanting to get into close combat, and that's pretty much true in Kharkov, Red Barricades, Valor of the Guards. Like, if I'm next to a Russian, it's the Russian advance phase, I'm breaking and routing away, because that guy's not going to end up dead. He'll just rally at some point, and I'll have him for the next day, if nothing else. But so when I was like, that's why as the Russians haven't seen what I did to that H7 building, I just was going to just let them have it. Now, you're right in that it gives the German a good fire base to be able to shoot a lot of the stuff, especially out to the north. The guys in the Q factory and the U factory can be seen from that second level, but you set up your 76Ls so that you can smoke those fire groups once they do get up there. So, because your best weapons as the Russians are those 376L artillery pieces.
Right. And let me ask you something. Absolutely honest question, and I think it's one of the things from a design perspective that you want to make sure isn't present in the design of a Hazel or a campaign game. We don't want the Germans to be able to make the campaign game unwinnable on day one.
Yeah, I don't think it's that bad, though. I've got some suggestions above and beyond what we've already talked about as far as like the T-34s coming in. And so I was looking at the 1.7 that Brian just sent me. The Russians actually have less guys at the start than they did in
No,
1.6.
that was just a typo, so we fixed that one up.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's reassuring because yeah, we didn't want that to
No,
happen. But now I think those T-34s coming on, it really helps. It prevents those half tracks from just running amok over in the like V to AA rows.
I'd actually like to see the Russians have a couple more ATRs at start.
And you know, if the T-34s show up over there, they at least have to send this at least one, if not two Stugs to help deal with them so that, you know, otherwise the half tracks are going to have to hide. Because that's the thing is I find I think it's hard for the Russians to hold like, and maybe you can give it a shot to try to hold the H7 building, but to hold that, the M factory, which is important, and then the of course the big one, the J one, the real long thing, to have sufficient forces in there to hold that, you're hard pressed to stop the Germans running around over in the north. You just don't have enough guys, and there's also a lot of cover. There's all those debris hexes, the rubble. It's hard to see anything unless you're upstairs, and the Russians don't have that many long range weapons. That was one reason I really think that you guys ought to consider letting them have that heavy machine gun back, because I always put that heavy machine gun at level 2 in S15 with an 8.1 liter. And that guy, for one thing, can see out past the wall and shoot like 2 down 3s at any half squads that are trying to run like from V to, you know, up to that DD4 building, and, you know, unless they're behind the wall. But, you know, there could be other Russians that can see them if they're behind the wall, they're closer. Like that heavy machine gun in S15 second just covers a lot of approaches
Right.
to all that stuff in the north, but also the open ground that's like in front of Q9 and S8. When the Germans, because Germans are going to come through that soccer field and try to push right into Q9, basically starting on turn 2. So anyway,
Actually, quick story from a playtest guy. I had a Russian 9.2 with the heavy in S16, and Brian rubbled R15, S15, and I think Q15 and 14. So that I had literally the 9.2 with the heavy could almost sweep the Germans across the map. It was insane.
yeah, you can't get that 9.2 on day one, though, right?
No, not anymore. That was before the changes.
Okay.
But
As the Russians are saying, the
one
Germans.
of the things that, and you don't count on it, but the bombardment has rubbled something every time we played, and that's a dynamic that, and we also should mention too, a little off not mentioned part of this is that both sides get to place wrecks. Now it's 2 wrecks each. Prior to the beginning of the campaign game, and when you look at this map, there's literally the right places and wrong places for those wrecks to go. Not a monstrous deal, but given
No,
the
I
lack of
think
go ahead.
no, those wrecks are a big deal. I was kind of bummed out when it went down to 2. I liked having 3 of them because, like, well, first off, as the Germans, I stick them like right next to that H7 building. I'll put one in like F6. I'll put another one in J6. So now when I'm running up there, armored assault, and there's also a wreck there to give me cover. And the Russians, I like putting one in K25, which lets you go in between those factories without having to be in the open
Right.
ground,
Yep.
like that kind of stuff. And that's a nice touch. And again, I was playing up the Germans' potency, which I do feel is a thing, but it doesn't detract from the fact that this is still fun to play. And with a little bit of tweaking, you know, I'm really looking forward to this coming out. Like you said earlier, the playability of Like being able to sit down with a campaign game with all the bells and whistles. You have your purchase tables, you have your Russians get to battle hardened guys in between scenarios. I mean, everybody likes all that stuff. But it's also, you're not looking at 23 games like, Valor of the Guards or Red October or whatever. You got 4 days, 21 turns. You could definitely knock this out and maybe even switch sides and do it again after 6 months or something
And
like
I
that.
think it's just big enough too that you could 4-player it and have it be a very fun experience.
Yeah, and then it's always like, playing with your friends in campaign games is a lot of fun. The social aspect of it, along with just getting to play ASL. So
The fun factor is easy because you got tigers in factories. I mean, tiger tank in a factory. Come on, who's not having a good time playing that?
And
Well, I
NKV
really do
NKV.
really like the fact that the tiger is, we're all nerds, history nerds, and all the things that go with that. And hearing the fact that the tiger was just an unbeatable thing when it first came on. There's not a ton of scenarios in my mind that where the tiger is that unstoppable beast. And in this one tiger is a potential nightmare for the Russians. You have to hope that the guy you're playing that has the tiger plays like me and leaves his tiger unescorted but with infantry and alone for a kill from but it speaks to the historical accuracy in my mind of not just the map but the forces as well.
yeah, and you're right. The Tiger and also those Mark IIIs that come with it. Mainly the eight machine gun factor is just a huge deal. And so one thing I would say as the Germans in this, don't like the Russians do have a lot of guns, but you're still kind of not invulnerable from the front, but it's 13 on 5 with the
Right, you got a 5 to
76L,
immobilize. Yeah.
and it's the 45 is only a 10, so you're going to need a side shot on the Stugs. But like if when Fort and I have been playing, we just drive the Stugs right into the factories. Like they're just coming right in there, and then the SS are going to advance underneath of them, and the Russians pretty much just have to withdraw. They just you're sitting right next to a tank that you can't hurt. Like even if you have guns in, like, to say the J factory, if they're down towards the bottom end, you can't hit a Stug that's like through +5 hindrances.
in small
And
target.
so once those tanks come in there, you just drive in. You got the vehicular entrances on a couple sides. You just advance under them, and then you just start creeping your way up through the factory. And along with all your smoke capability, it's a tough puzzle for the Russians to solve. And I'm thinking before this gets released, the Russians probably be beefed up a little bit. But like I said, it's still fun to play, and I think people are really going to enjoy it. And you've done a good job with this, Andy. And
Cheers.
I know people like Cotton, and I think this is right down that same road.
Hey, real quick, Andy, how are you doing on time? I know you're on the other side of the world.
No, it's really good. It's mid-morning and the boss green lit me. I've got another half an hour or so, 10 minutes,
You
half
good
an hour.
guy? You okay, guy?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Brian. This saved me from watching the end of the Redskin game. So that, I mean, they're now 3-6.
I could have, I've been following Washington and I was really wrapped after last season, but this season not so good.
I'm gonna have Garrick throw up the purchase charts for the Russians and Germans prior to this conversation. Garrick will show the German and then the Russian, and I'm very curious to hear from you three. Let's start off with the Germans. Guy, in your opinion, and then Andy and Brian jump in here. German day one. What's your objective purchase wise, and what are your goals?
Well, I think that generally almost any campaign game, you basically buy as much infantry as you can, as the rules will let you. But in this case, I mean, the Germans have so many points. They have 27. Is that right?
26.
They can almost buy it.
26.
Yeah, they can get almost everything they want. Like I said, we've been buying I1 and I2, which are both infantry companies. That's 9 SS squads with leaders and support weapons. Then
Hang on.
I3, which
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm gonna write an email and send Garrick this stuff right now. So I'm here listening. I'm just making an email. But go ahead.
okay,
Sorry.
yeah. So it's I1, I2, I3, which are two infantry companies and one HQ platoon, the one with the 8.1 liter, which is the one you'd want to get. And then heavy weapons 5A and 5B, which are a heavy machine gun, and then a 251-9 and a 251-2, which is the 75 millimeter half track and the mortar carrier. And then A3, two more Stugs with a 9.1 armor leader. Then A5, which is a Martyr, and another 251-9. Mainly, you just more smoke. That only costs 1 point for two AFVs, so can't beat that. And then the last 2 points are the OBA. You obviously want to buy a module every time you can, and then the bombardment. And I think that leaves you 1 point left over that I don't think there's anything to spend it on. I think you pretty much just save that for day 2.
Yeah, unless you want more AA trucks, which are, I find the AA trucks to be almost useless. They keep
They're
the guys
good if
off
the
roof.
Russian wants to set up on the roof.
Yeah.
Because they can sit next to each other, and what do they have, 6 or 8 firepower? I can't
I
remember.
think they're 8.
Yeah, so they can fire 16 up one at somebody on a roof out to range 16. Now, I really wish the Russians could buy that 82 millimeter mortar on the first day and put it on the roof back in X-25. Like, I put the 50 millimeter mortar back there, but it has a 20 hex range, which isn't bad, but it just can't. It can reach to the wall in the 5 row, but it can't reach past it. So I set it up there, but then Fortenberry, of course, set his vehicles up 21 hexes away and started shooting at me, so I had to leave. But if they had the 81 set up on that roof, and on day 2, that's where it's going to go, because that 81 millimeter mortar is like really bad news against all those open top half tracks, along with being able to smoke the Germans' fire groups if they're in the right spots. So anyway, that was what we've been purchasing for the Germans on day 1, Curt, was what I just said.
Andy, you had a comment about the half tracks, though, I think.
Yeah, the unarmored ones. So they were historical. There's some really good pictures of them being used in the battle. And so generally what you speak is you treat them like precious children. They're very vulnerable. You don't put them anywhere. But on day 2, what we tended to do is if the Germans are in any of the factories, especially I-14, the big long factory, it's not a bad place to put them in a factory with a bit of a kill stack, because it's kind of like if you've got a 9.2 German leader, a medium and a heavy, well, they can fire group with these half tracks. So you're throwing out an enormous amount of firepower. So you don't do much with them in the first date. In the second date, if you've got them set up in the vehicular entrance of a factory, they can be quite potent, and they really sweep and clear the factory location. So you almost like keep them back, and you don't use them in day 1. But in day 2, there's a couple of neat places to put them. The unarmored half track.
Yeah, and sit behind the wall.
Yeah, that too.
Like if there's Russians in, like U7 or W10, like you can sit. They get a 4 up 2 at you. I think they need like a 3 to do something to you. To the vehicle itself, you still have to take a morale check on a 4, but you can sit there and shoot, 8 or 16 up 2 at the Russians that are sitting out in the buildings. So yeah, they're definitely. I mean, you got to be careful with them, but they're definitely useful.
All right.
Yep. I mean, with those, when we play tested here, they was kind of standard German purchases. I kind of like talking about the Russians, guys' feedback. In the last couple of weeks, last couple of play tests we've done here, we took away the Russian heavy machine gun. Following in some of these conversations, probably insert it back into day 1. I wouldn't mind that. That's how it's always been play tested here. I've play tested it a couple of times here without the Russian heavy, especially on that second level, locations around S15 and stuff like that. So I kind of like that idea of bringing that back in for the Russian setup. So in terms of the Russian purchases, what we like to do is that NKVD company comes in as your key reinforcement company on turn 3. So, and along with...
that's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah,
for
absolutely. And buy the guns, buy the second Russian infantry company, which is pretty much where you're at. standard purchases for the Russians.
Looking at the 1.7 little administration here, looking at the 1.7 rules, I think, and it seems like we need to up the CGs for the 2 T-34 you can purchase. They still get to buy one on one, and that's a mistake.
Well, they oh yeah, no, that should be changed.
Yeah. Little proofing exercise right in the middle of our podcast.
Yeah, I think I sent through those changes in the email. So essentially what that means is I think 2 T-34s following, especially Guy, your comments, bringing them on in the Russian as a compulsory Russian
You get
reinforcement
them
is
right.
good, but not having four. Four to me is a bit of a stretch. Mind you, I appreciate where you guys are at, Guy and Gary, your play test, but I've got to balance it up with the half a dozen or so we've done through here, which made
No,
the Russians
absolutely.
a bit more resilient. You always got to factor in with the different style of players. Some players, I'll just make a general comment about the scenarios that I've designed that have high quality German SS with multiple arms. The very skilled players in Australia, and we're talking about guys who regularly win tournaments, are very powerful indeed. And they will, they can utilize these forces very, very well. So, you've got to balance up, but with players with less experience, you know, you got to, if you make the Russians too strong, they're over a little bit too strong.
Yeah, it's one of the problems we have in general with playtesting is you're trying to balance that not every player that's playing is, Guy Chaney versus Gary
Well,
Ford.
and that guy, we had this conversation, which is the challenge is exactly what Brian just said is, a balance for two average players could be a horribly unbalanced scenario for two really good players, which speaks back to and the point Guy had made, which I've kind of been adhering to religiously since then, which is make the balances for these scenarios meaningful in the sense that if you've got a disparity in play talent and play levels, that the balance will give the lesser player a legitimate shot to potentially win a scenario.
Yeah, and it's just like Andy said, if like when you've got 35 8 morale squads, nine on the back, and then like a dozen vehicles that have at least S8, that's like warning signs flashing, right? It's that's you're going to need a pretty stubborn force to hold that off. So,
but those 628s with 9 broken morale in a factory with plus 110 around them get a pretty good punch in.
yeah, they're good. You just don't.
But I got to admit,
I think it's
bug in
mostly
the factory is a brutal tactic.
day 2 that those guys are going to start to get into the fight, and and they are good.
Yep,
Especially,
I think that's a guaranteed buy for the Russians day one for that reason alone, to get those guys up into the J factory and potentially get settled from a defensive perspective to not allow the Germans to get giddy, because they don't come on till turn 3, and they come on the east edge of the map, and it's 3 movement phases to get to the M11 building. And
yeah, and talking about the vagaries of the bombardment, the last one we played, the Germans called their bombardment in on the I guess it's the west edge of the J factory, like in J14. And J14 got rubbled, which is an absolute nightmare for the Russians because the Germans come in there and now they're sitting in a +3 rubble hex, firing down with their 9.2, of course, firing down through the factory, and shots back at them are like really, you got to get a smoke round on them or they're just going to clear you out of there. So, yeah, like every time you play, something different will happen with the rubble, or maybe something catches on fire.
Yep.
That's the fun of these.
That's the replayability.
Right.
Last play test, my bombardment broke 1447. Whee! That was worth a point.
Right. And then the one before that killed a 9.2 stack.
Yeah, well, and a gun, and a 76.
Yep.
Yeah, and another key point too is that when you guys were talking about OBA using the smoke or using the HE, and we missed this, Curt, when we were playing at Aslock. You only get to ignore the having the extra chit draw for concealed or unknown units if
Right.
you're using your pre-reg hacks.
Right.
Right. So you don't want to, you're not going to be trying to call stuff in on concealed guys with that extra chit draw because the piles
Right.
are so small. There's a
Right.
good chance you'll cancel it. But
Right.
if you get the right, like I tried to put all my guns where they were, I wouldn't have two guns in the same FFE if it came
Right.
down. Because,
Well, and
and Andy, we talked
the
about
draw
one more
piles are
point.
3-1 German, 3 black, 1 red for the German, 3 black, 2 red for the Russian.
Yeah, and Andy explained that the Russians really didn't do this, but I was campaigning a little bit maybe to get a couple fortified hexes for them, just because when there's a gun in a hex with smoke on it, that's when the Germans are going to come into melee to try to get rid of it. Where if you were able to fortify that and keep a squad in there, you'd be able to keep them out.
So just on that, so just as a general design rule, like in Hatton, I'm not a big fan of fortified locations. So I won't. That's a philosophical thing that we go on now for. So as a general rule, I would avoid that. But just as a general summary of this conversation, is if you can get it right so that the Germans don't overwhelm, noting that you had that issue with high quality attacking forces, it's always tough to balance up. But if you can get that right, I feel that the campaign game 2, 3, phase 2, 3, and 4 flows quite nicely, a little better. It's just getting that initial thing right. And it's a bit like the start of Hatton, where the Germans pour in. If they go too far and cut off the Americans and don't allow them to fall back and all that, it's kind of over in day one. So we've got a similar dynamic here where the Germans have strong attacking forces, want the defenders to be able to solidify in the front line, but further back without actually losing too many. And that's the goal. And then 2, 3, and 4 plays a bit more like a normal scenario.
Yeah, and let me say that all the things I've said about the Germans, we've never played past day one. So, and the victory conditions are tough. They've got 21 movement phases to basically take the whole map against, 8 morale Russians, at least a decent amount of 8 morale Russians with 6 firepower sitting in factories. So they need some oomph to be able to pull it off. But yeah, and I look forward to trying it when it comes out.
Yep. Anybody want to add anything?
Quick, silly question, Andy. Soccer pitch, cricket pitch, level -1 terrain. Is that a ditch? What are N07?
Yes, it's a factory, and I think a lot of the Russian industrial complexes, they sponsored the local football team or soccer team. So I think it is pitch, and it was for the factory workers and stuff. I think that's the history. It's definitely so if you
Curt, we need to make sure that's mentioned in the rules, because right now that's level -1 terrain.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, it's a nice touch. And hey, I've been multitasking while we're talking, and I think you guys are right. I can't find wherever it was that I thought you could trace strategic locations to have squads. So yeah, that's a big deal. And the rubble rules, at the front, it says that rubble's treated as a building for route, rally, ambush, and street fighting. So you wouldn't actually be able to set up in there. So you probably want, clarify that. So
set up to that.
Yeah, or just put in the initial OB, they can set up in buildings or rubble.
Hey, Garrick, make sure you leave this stuff in the podcast so that people can see that, we're still constantly finding little things while we just read. This game is so complicated that you're always finding something. It's crazy. And, we've been doing this for 25 years and we still occasionally make mistakes and find things.
Well, and I think probably more important for me is the fact that we're always very, very open to trying to make the product better. And when we get input from people with, valuable, meaningful opinions, we take it.
Yeah, and kudos to you guys for that. And you might have mentioned it at the start, but as far as like when we can expect to see this available, maybe Winter Offensive, or is that optimistic?
I'm thinking probably just after Winter Offensive sometime. I'm thinking it'll probably go on pre-order maybe at Winter Offensive and be ready not long after that.
Okay.
So because
From my
there's not a ton
perspective,
of go ahead.
I'd like to see it on pre-order tomorrow. There's no reason for it not to. It's certainly going to be a product, so we're going to get this on pre-order sooner rather than later.
Right. I think we're going to make
However,
sure that it's available for Christmas
however,
or pre-order.
manufacturing being what it is, we're the best if we turned it in right now we could do is the end of January. So I think it's going to come out first quarter of next year. I want it to come out first quarter of next year, but it's not going to be a Winter Offensive for sure. We're actually crossing our fingers. We're hopeful that Marco Polo Bridge will be a Winter Offensive.
Okay.
So, which does a nice job of throwing a little odd situation in, Chinese,
Well, and
Japanese.
we also recognize too that we hear a lot of players who whose wives want to get them something unique, and war games tend to be those things. So we'd like to try and hit the Christmas holiday with pre-orders for these things to allow that to happen as well.
Absolutely. We get
Yeah,
called.
this is going to be a popular product, I think, and we didn't mention it, but there's also 10 scenarios that come with this that really interesting situations, nice force
Yes,
mixes. You get to play on the Kharkov map on most of them, so those are going
yeah.
to be popular as well.
You got a story for us, Andy, before we close out.
Two things. One is it's called Grand Theft Tarkov, and it reflects the historical situation when the Germans were falling back out of Kharkov in February, and the orders got mixed up. Instead of retreating, this German company was ordered to attack one of the factories, and they were surrounded by Russians. They realized it was a lost cause. And because the factories had a whole lot of T-34s around it, because it used to be a T-34 factory, the only way it survived was to hotwire a bunch of T-34s with their attached engineers, load into them, and just get the hell out of Dodge. So hence the so it has this ebb and flow. The Germans storm into a factory, really like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's the lost cause. And then the only way to get out, some of them, and get victory points was to load up in Hotwire a T-34 and get out. So hopefully that's fun. That was a tricky one to balance. Hopefully that track. But I want to tell you, if you've got a few moments about how, when I was finalizing the map. And it goes to the trivia, spoil the answers for, but I thought it's a worthwhile story. So I've been working in defence for nearly 20 years. I finished up there, and I was lucky enough, an intel analyst, into Afghanistan. And this is in 2013 or 2012, actually. And I'm on the base, on the Australian base in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan. You work 13-hour days, and you had to decompress before you went to sleep. So what I did is I had my laptop with me, I got up the Kharkov and Hatton map, and I was finalising the Vassal maps. And all these Australian soldiers would walk past me late at night thinking I'm writing up some sort of intelligence product for the next day's activities. Go, what's going on here? And it was just too hard to explain. So I just nod and go, yeah, I'm geospatial analyst, intel analyst, and with, the M12 or whatever. Yeah. I'll let you, just don't go tell your boss. And it was just easy, but it was the only way to decompress before you went to sleep. It was such a busy, intense time. And I just spent an hour each night finalising the maps, and I finalised them in 2012. There in 2013, I sent Chaz Argent for to get his opinion on them. So in Afghanistan.
You totally blew that trivia question,
I know,
Andy,
but I wanted
because
to. I thought you were going to introduce it at the start, and anyway, I'll come up with a different one.
So listen, both of you guys, thank you so much for your time. Great input, great feedback. I know people are going to love listening to this thing, and we will hopefully you have open invitations to come back and be a part of this show anytime you guys have time or anytime, and we'll be reaching out for sure. So thank you
We'd
both.
love to. Yep. We'll see everybody at Winter Offensive, if not sooner.
all right,
Yep.
well, probably not Andy, but okay.
Cheers, thanks.
He doesn't make that much
All right.
profit off the royalty.
All right,
I
guys.
know.
Hit like, subscribe. Check in with us next week. Have a great week, guys.
Hey, we had a great time talking with Andy and Guy. Good stuff there. I missed asking Guy a question I kind of regret. I wanted to ask about the lateral movement for the Russians, if he had any issues with that, getting from factory to redefend or whatnot. Maybe he can comment in the comments section. That would be awesome. I also came up with bonus trivia question, extra special bonus trivia question. Gary's going to post a picture. This shows a German 548 who has to get into close combat with that concealed Russian unit, which is a 527 with an ATR. Obviously, you can't prep fire. There'd be no way you can get into into close combat. Please send me how you get from where he is into close combat, and all applicable rules and things apply. We're going to assume no cowering. We're going to assume that, what else are we going to assume? I think no cowering is the biggest one. Spell it out. So say German movement phase, I would do this. The Russians would do that. I would then
Okay,
hope
so
this happens.
you're asking what's the safest way for the German squad to get into close combat with the Russian?
Not necessarily the safest way, any way you can get there. I mean,
Well, I mean, so
if you
so
want
the
to,
obvious answer is assault move into P9, throw smoke, assault move, blah blah blah. Well, you actually can't.
right. But then what is the Russian going to do? He's going to shoot. He's going to lay residual fire power. So maybe you can't do something else. I mean, that's what I'm looking for, is a complete listing, basically, of the movement phase through the advance phase, including marker placement. It's very important for this trivia question. Here's one that only ASL players can do. Sorry about that, but you'll get a free copy of Kharkov when it comes
All right.
out. If
So
you have
ask the
correct
question again. What's the trivia question?
The trivia question is going to be, the German 548 has to get into close combat in the Russian stack in Q10. Spell out movement phase through advance phase, exactly what's going to happen, how you're going to move that German unit into close combat, what the Russians are going to do in reaction. Marker placement counts because we're playing full ASL here. And let's see what the results are. Obviously, you could advance into P. You could run P8, Q8, late CX, Q9. You could run around to the other side of the guy if you were really crazy. There's lots of options here. It's more about you specifying exactly what happens for that period of time so that you're getting everything correct. And then if you get everything correct, you'll be entered into the pool and we'll draw someone who will win the prize. Bonus trivia question. Kharkov bonus trivia question, whatever you wish to call it. Other than that, I thought it was a great show.
Yeah,
Great
that
2
was fun.
shows, and we split it.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of really informative conversation from both those guys.
Good conversation. I mean, good
Yeah.
historical and how
Yep.
they play down under from Andy. And quite frankly, Guy's one of the best players in the world. I mean, he's a top guy, and you could just hear it. I would make a suggestion, and he's like, no, that's terrible. You're going to do this or whatever.
Yep. Well,
Oddly enough,
and he
I own Guy,
clearly,
having, I've never lost to Guy, so I'm not sure why he thinks my ideas are so bad, but that's okay. So
but
we'll
it's
just have to
clear
see.
Guy thinks the Germans can't lose.
It's clear that he thinks the
And
Germans can't lose, and that's okay. We're not trashing on
no,
Guy.
but it's also for someone like me who runs a playtest. I listen to people like that. Well, if it's clear, sometimes they're but like you said, you got 35-8 morale guys with 9 morale broken sides. You've got 9 tubes of smoke. It's just a matter of time.
That's a lot of
Right.
guys, and they're all good guys. So I imagine in the end result, we're going to see that heavy machine gun again. We're going to see the setup restriction lifted to some degree to give the Russians some flexibility.
Right.
We should probably reset up and play our campaign game based on that, which means once again, we'll have to go ahead and get it all together. What maybe we can use tonight to finish that up. So
Well, that's fine. No, we're fine. We can restart. We got open-ended schedule. But yeah. No, that was a lot of fun.
Like it. I mean,
I think that's the strength of the podcast is we're nerds talking about nerd shit that nerds like to listen to. And
for sure.
Somebody listens into this, they're like, what are they talking about?
My buddy at work was tickled to hear that I was doing a podcast. And I, of course, played it up like Kim Kardashian influencer level to my, to the 824 subscribers we have or whatever it is right now.
Yeah.
But he's like, dude, I listened to it for like 20 minutes. It was compelling, but I don't know what you're talking about, so I couldn't finish. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, but it's gaming nerd nirvana,
Yep.
hopefully.
All
Anyways,
right,
that's what's
P.
that. Have a great
All right,
evening,
buddy.
Curt. I will
Yep.
chat with you later.
Yep.
And I'm gonna go see how the rest of the Redskins game went, although I'm
All right,
pretty sure
Bubba.
they
Talk
lost.
soon.